Hi, I'm Loris Alexander. This is Bridge City News, and here are some of the top stories we've been following. We tell you everything you need to know about COVID-19 in Alberta today. Plus, in the U.S. and abroad, researchers are beginning to test younger and younger kids to ensure the shots are safe and work for each age. And police in Boulder, Colorado say they're still trying to determine the gunman's motive in a supermarket shooting that took place last week.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News Weekend Edition.
Thanks for joining us. On Friday, Alberta reported 717 new cases of COVID-19 and 3 more deaths. At least 4 in 10 recent new cases of COVID-19 in Alberta were acquired through household transmission, the Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Dina Hinshaw, said in a news conference on Thursday. Dr. Hinshaw said the number one riskiest activity is living in a household with someone who's infectious. She urged household members not to treat the spread as inevitable. Instead, anyone with symptoms should stay away from the other people in the household and get tested as soon as possible. She noted that free hotel rooms are available so people who need to can isolate outside the family home. She also warned the province is seeing spread across multiple settings, with people letting their guards down and not following public health rules at restaurants, fitness centers, work or social gatherings, which are currently against the rules, she reminded people. In the U.S. and abroad, researchers are beginning to test COVID-19 vaccines on younger and younger kids to make sure the shots are safe and work for each age.
It was exciting, but also a bit nerve-wracking and scary for the first part. But it's really easy, and if you just sit still during the shot.
I've seen the consequence of this disease, so the ability to make a contribution to that is not lost on me.
So we came home when we found out that it was going to be an option and just sat down and said, it's your choice. This is something that you do not have to do, but would you want to participate? And then kind of explaining to them what that meant.
Boulder police say they're still trying to determine the gunman's motive in the supermarket shooting that killed 10 people this past week. The county's district attorney says additional attempted murder charges will be filed against the suspect.
I will share with you that officers from the Boulder Police Department and the University of Colorado Boulder Police Department, so both Boulder PD and CU Boulder PD, responded very, very quickly to the report of shots being fired at the King Soopers. Immediately after responding, they charged into the store. Their action saved other civilians from being killed. They charged into the store and immediately faced a very significant amount of gunfire from the shooter, who at first they were unable to locate, and they put their lives at risk.
As scientists work to create a vaccine against COVID-19, a small but fervent anti-vaccination movement is standing up against it. Campaigners are claiming that the coronavirus vaccines will be used to implant microchips into people. A Lethbridge pharmacist and a member of the Lethbridge COVID prevention community group wants to set the record straight.
We are getting too many calls, especially with the AstraZeneca. And sometimes also some people prefer Pfizer over Moderna, or some people prefer Moderna over Pfizer. So certainly it's good to do your own due diligence, but unless you are like a scientist or you worked in a active COVID research in an expert panel with any of the regulatory body, I would still listen to what the authorities say, because every guideline is made up by hundreds of doctors and scientists who did their due diligence research, and also by millions of people who got immunizations. With a European Medical Agency, this is the official report from them, and there are 7 cases out of 20 million people got vaccinated. So that means including Saskatchewan and Alberta altogether, we will get just 1 person who would get blood clot. And it's still not kind of life-threatening, we would say.
We want to put the awareness in people that, you know what, you should get vaccinated and there are vaccines available. So why not go and as per your age group comes in, why not go to the book your vaccines and why not go and get vaccinated so at least we can keep Lethbridge more and more safe. That's what is the aim of the group, to spread more and more awareness. And that's where we wanted to bring in a pharmacist as well, so who can explain exactly that there is nothing wrong in taking a vaccine.
After Lethbridge City Council shot down another dry house or sober shelter from the Mustard Seed and Lethbridge Soup Kitchen, it appears as though the Mustard Seed is moving on from Lethbridge. Executive Director of the Soup Kitchen, Bill Ginther, confirmed that the relationship between his group and the Mustard Seed is most likely over. As for the Soup Kitchen, they need our help now more than ever.
The Mustard Seed has told me and told the media that they will be withdrawing, and they have. I'm not so convinced they won't come back if ever they were offered an opportunity without all the zoning. And so, but having said that, we were in transition kind of in terms of adjusting to joining them, merging with them that since October, November. And so the conversation was always about what happens when you move. We saw our support, our financial support starting to wane, not erode, but it had lessened. In the last 2 months, it's been about half of what we normally get. And that's problematic because we're spending twice the amount that we get in. And so we will recoup some of these people. It's going to be a pretty big task to let people know that we're still here. We are not going anywhere. We're not Mustard Seed. We're the Soup Kitchen. I guess that my message is we're still here. We're not going anywhere. We will still provide 3 meals a day. We just need your help to make sure that happens.
To donate and help the Lethbridge Soup Kitchen, give Bill a call at 587-220-8688. Now that spring is in the air, Bridge City News spoke with a local pet retailer about some of the most highly sought after pet attire trends for the season. Everything from raincoats to cooling vests, even sunglasses. Here's what they had to say.
We have some fun bandanas for your dog to show off their personality. We have some raincoats because you don't really want a stinky wet dog all the time when it gets rainy, and they like to be out in the rain. So we also love having water toys. Water toys are great because they float and lots of water fun for the dog. There's also frozen bones in the freezers. So a nice frozen bone for your dog is a great way to get them calcium. We like to have a variety of water bottles and water bowls. Just because we are always on the go, wanting to go hiking, and just being out and about is fun. But we always have to keep in mind to keep our dog hydrated all the time. It's very important for us, and so it is for them too.
Streets Alive unveiled their 18-bed recovery home on Wednesday. Bridge City News was given a tour of the space. The all-female home aims to bring sobriety, accountability, and healing to women in our community.
The instant I walked in this house, I felt love. The love in this house, the prayer that this home has been soaked in. And it's not just love from people, but it's the love of God that I felt. The Holy Spirit is here, and I feel him every time I walk in these doors.
For Streets Alive, it's been a 15-year journey. The home itself is beautifully decorated, and intentionally so.
Because they've never been exposed to something this nice. They've always been used to having secondhand. Some of them have slept on floors. Some of them have slept in sleeping bags in the coulees. And for them to, I remember one girl came in once and she went, I have my own comforter. And then she went, I have my own bed. And she just started to cry. We have no idea the impact on somebody who is that broken to feel like they don't deserve a home like you and I. And they walk into this home and we work with them so that they understand they actually deserve this.
Streets Alive stressed that the building is not a shelter, but a place where these women have made the choice to stay sober.
They're tired of feeling beat down by life, and they've just made that decision that as hard as it's going to be, it's harder out there.
The women are placed in a 3-step program and pay for room and board. Streets offers additional programming through a service called Genesis Connect.
from art journaling to programming that includes learning to, healthy boundaries. All those kinds of classes make a difference. We have psychoeducational classes that happen here.
And when it's all said and done,
they learn how to be women. So, women of faith.
For Bridge City News, I'm Ainsley O'Reilly.
Recapping one of our top news stories, our province reported at least 4 in 10 recent new cases of COVID-19 acquired through household transmission, according to Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Dina Hinshaw. And a look at weekend weather. Tonight, partly cloudy with a west wind 50 kilometers per hour gusting to 70, along with a low of 7. On Sunday, a mix of sun and cloud with winds up to 100 kilometers per hour in the morning and a high of 15.
Today's weather is brought to you by ColumbianDirect.com. Café Coffee, specialty coffee from our family to yours.
Coming up, BCN's Hal Roberts checks in with Lethbridge MP Rachel Harder, who has an update from Ottawa for us during her Q&A.
The federal Liberals announced a highly anticipated or perhaps dreaded budget will be coming out on April the 19th. We should see how many billions of dollars have been spent during the pandemic. To discuss this in more detail is Lethbridge MP Rachel Harder joining me from Ottawa. Rachel, billions have been spent, but billions more need to be spent to help businesses survive right now.
Well, Hal, that's one opinion. The other one is perhaps we could let industry leaders do what they do best, and that is, of course, put forward creative ideas, be innovative, be entrepreneurial, and roll a profit. As a result of that, of course, it provides jobs, and it meets consumer demand, which I think is ultimately really great for our economy and gets the ball rolling again.
So what do you think of all of the money that the Trudeau Liberals have been spending, the taxpayers' dollars so far during the pandemic?
At first, when the pandemic became a reality, parliamentarians agreed to shutting down Parliament for 2 weeks. I'll note that it's 53 weeks later. And we wanted to give time for the federal government, the Liberals, to come up with a plan and to be able to move forward with that. Unfortunately, we still don't have that plan. But initially, they asked to be able to roll out some money in order to help Canadians who were finding themselves in a really difficult situation. And of course they were in a difficult situation. They were forced to stay home, and lockdowns prevented them from being able to work. And so when the government puts those types of measures in place, of course the government should also make up for that by providing some financial assistance. However, again, it's 53 weeks later and counting. There's still no concrete plan in place in terms of coming out of this pandemic and being able to return back to normal. And I think Canadians are desperate for that.
Yeah, your leader, Aaron O'Toole, wants the government to produce that plan within 20 days to start lifting COVID-19 restrictions, Rachel. That includes reopening the border to the U.S. for non-essential travel. How important is it to reopen that border?
It's certainly about reopening the border, but it's about so much more. Again, it's about putting a plan in place. I mean, we're talking about a data-driven plan that will serve Canadians well toward a vibrant future. And we just don't have that. And again, that was promised at the beginning. We were told that we were going to shut down for 2 weeks, give the government an opportunity to find its bearings, to figure out what was going on, to be able to flatten the curve, and then we were going to come back and put a concrete plan down on paper and then start implementing. Again, 53 weeks later, that still hasn't happened. And so we have those who have small businesses, they're hurting immensely. We have individuals who have lost their jobs. In fact, over 1 million Canadians have lost their jobs during this time. But Hal, the story is worse than that even, and that is to say that the secondary health effects of the pandemic actually have to do with mental health concerns. we're seeing them skyrocket. We're seeing suicide numbers go up. I mean, right now in Canada, every 24 hours, there are 10 people who commit suicide. We're seeing those rates go up dramatically in children. I mean, hell, this is not okay. We are not okay as a country. And Canadians are begging for a concrete data-driven plan that is going to allow us to safely return to normal. Canadians deserve that, and that's what Conservatives are calling for.
So let me ask you something. With everything that's been said and done, and especially now that more of the vaccines are rolling into Canada, do you think perhaps we'll see an election this spring?
Well, hell, look, here's what I can tell you. I can tell you that the Liberals are ramping up spending. I can tell you that the Liberals are really enjoying playing with the data when it comes to vaccines. Most recently, they've said that they're now going to allow for up to 4 months between dose 1 and dose 2, which health officials have warned against. But the reason that the Liberals want to do that is because they want to be able to report back to Canadians how many shots have been put in arms rather than how many Canadians have been fully vaccinated. That number is very different, but they're thinking that it'll make them look good. On top of that, Trudeau is ahead in the polls right now. And of course, that's a prime time for him to call an election. It's sad because he's taking advantage of a situation that puts him ahead in the polls and would allow him to then call an election and potentially be quite successful in that. But it's at the expense of Canadians. They don't want to be dragged out right now when we're in the middle of dealing with a pandemic. They want this government to get to work and solve the real problems that are in front of us.
So it's safe to say that your party doesn't want an election right now?
I think that's safe to say, Hal.
Okay. Now let's talk about Bill C7 for just a moment here, Rachel. The Medical Assistance in Dying Bill, which received royal assent. What are some of your biggest concerns regarding the new MAID bill?
Yeah. Hal, I really appreciate you asking this question because I think it's something that's not getting proper coverage in our nation. This bill will forever change the social fabric of Canada. It will forever change the way that we view life and death. And so Bill C7 expands the legislation around euthanasia. It allows for those who have a mental illness to request euthanasia, and the mental illness can be their sole reason for doing so. Now, that's the result of an amendment that came back from the Senate when it was sent there. But before that amendment was even made, I believe that the bill already went too far, that it failed to protect those with a disability. Ultimately, as legislators, we should be concerned with the most vulnerable. That should be top of mind for us. And unfortunately, this legislation just doesn't do that. In fact, I would say that it makes them further at risk of being, mistreated. We heard compelling testimony from many, many, many witnesses who came forward at committee during the time that this bill was studied. And those witnesses, who had a disability or who had a mental illness, they pleaded with those members of the committee not to go in this direction.
Now, the federal Liberals have been blasting the Tories, your party, over climate change. Did your party recently vote to say at your convention that climate change is not real, as some of the mainstream media has been reporting?
Hal, it's interesting because the Liberals have had more than 5 years to put forward an environmental plan. And the most they've been able to come up with is a carbon tax. And then on top of that, during the pandemic, they had the nerve to increase that carbon tax even further. I mean, that's something that's impacting everyday Canadians, whether you're driving your kids to soccer practice or you're driving to work or you're heating your home. Oh my goodness, how dare you heat your home in Canada, for crying out loud. Like, that's what this government's plan is in terms of climate action. Hell, look, at the end of the day, our plan needs to be focused on stewardship. So as Conservatives, yes, we are exactly that. We are conservatives of the environment. So let's steward it really well. We only have one Earth. Let's take care of it. Let's put, practical steps in place that are going to facilitate a green planet. And I think by that, what I mean largely is we need to partner with industry. I mean, after all, we're talking about some of the most creative minds. We're talking about scientists. We're talking about those individuals who really have practical solutions to the problems we face when it comes to caring for the environment. As Conservatives, we believe in bringing them to the table, giving them a voice, and helping us move forward toward a solution.
So your party did not vote to say at the convention that climate change is not real then, in other words?
I think it's important to acknowledge that that was a two-part motion. And so one was acknowledging that climate change is real, and the other part to that motion was talking about how then to solve the problem. And so there were discrepancies in terms of, members within the party had disagreements in terms of how that solution should be rolled out. The vote fell where it fell.
Let me ask you something. Why do the Liberals focus so much on climate change when we're still in the middle of a COVID-19 pandemic?
Hal, that's a great question. I would argue that the Liberals are more full of talking points than they are any sort of action that would result in real change. For whatever reason, they've chosen that that should be a significant part of their narrative. But when we talk to Canadians, when I talk to those who come into my office or who call my office or who email my office, when I talk to Canadians, when I'm walking down the street here in Ottawa, even, what the issues that are top of mind for them are their family, their loved ones, taking care of their health, their well-being. I don't hear a lot of conversation around the environment these days.
And jobs. I mean, 10,000 restaurants. A new study came out, a new report. More than 10,000 restaurant owners had to close their doors across the country during the pandemic. It is so sad. Rachel, ever since Derek Sloan was punted from the CPC, the Conservative Party of Canada caucus, many are concerned about the fate of social conservatives within your party. Now, were some of those concerns addressed at the recent convention?
Yeah, Hal, I think one of the important things to note here is that the Conservative Party of Canada is the only party that allows for diversity of thought. Now, what that means is that, we hold a variety of viewpoints and sometimes we're going to disagree. But you know what, Hal, instead of looking at that as a disadvantage or a weakness, I actually view that as a strength. Because when I look at Canada, I see a country that is pluralistic in nature, a country where we have people from all sorts of backgrounds and walks of life with all sorts of beliefs and values. And, I think the Conservative Party of Canada shows itself to be a place where those individuals can find a political home because we reflect that diversity. And so, yes, sometimes we disagree, but let's learn to disagree without being disagreeable. I think Conservative members are trying our best to do that.
Now, you recently referred to Canada's agriculture sector as Canada's unsung superpower. Now, you say that agriculture and agri-food sectors contribute more than $100 billion to Canada's economy, which runs up to about 7% of our GDP. Rachel, is this the wave of the future, putting more of our eggs into the agribusiness basket? Pun intended?
Great pun, Hal. I certainly believe so. Absolutely. I've talked about this extensively. I believe that agriculture is our way forward. Agri-production, agri-science, agri-tech, agribusiness. Like, this is the way of the future. And we happen to be so incredibly blessed in Southern Alberta and in particular in Lethbridge because we have all of the necessary ingredients to excel. We have great soil, we have great sun, we have great access to water through irrigation, and we have fantastic talent and labor. And so with these key ingredients in mind, and available at our fingertips, we really have the ability to drive agriculture forward and to really lead not only within our country, but I would even say on the world stage.
What do you see as some of the most pressing issues here in Lethbridge that we're dealing with? Obviously, COVID-19, the pandemic, a lot of business owners are struggling. But let's also talk about the recent report from Alberta Health Services showing that in 2020, 52 people in our city died from a drug overdose, drug poisoning. And across the South Zone, there were 102 deaths caused by drug use, or a rate of 32.8 per 100,000 people. The provincial average was 28.7 per 100,000 people. So we still have a drug crisis here in our city.
Yeah, and how it's so sad because I think what we have to first do is pause and acknowledge that these individuals are human beings and they are people who have loved ones most often. And those loved ones are, hugely impacted by the overdose and the potential death that results. And so I think we have to acknowledge that first and foremost. I think the other thing we have to acknowledge is that, most people don't just stumble into a drug addiction. Most people don't choose that as their the thing that they want to engage in most in life. Most people, there's something else that happened that drove them to that. It's usually a coping mechanism for something absolutely devastating that took place. And so, all that to say, I think, we have a responsibility then to hold hope out to these individuals. And hope looks like detox. It looks like recovery. It looks like, mental health services. It looks like really helping these individuals be restored to a place of dignity and purpose, and where they are, able to look at themselves in the mirror and be really proud of who they are and excited about their future. They deserve that.
Thank you, Rachel. Let's talk about federal infrastructure projects for Lethbridge for just a moment. What can we look forward to possibly seeing come down the pipe?
Hal, I wish we could look forward to a whole lot. Unfortunately, this government has promised a ton when it comes to infrastructure, and I would even say that they've spent a ton, or at least they claim to have. They created something called an infrastructure bank for building major infrastructure projects across this country, and they allocated $35 billion to it. But to date, they haven't been able to show evidence of a single project being completed. And so this is a problem across the country, and we certainly see that as a problem in Lethbridge because we really haven't received much in the way of federal funding for infrastructure.
Lethbridge Conservative MP Rachel Harder, thanks for joining me today from Ottawa.
Thank you, Hal, for having me.
The Alberta economy is still going through some pretty tough times. We have the recession, the COVID-19 pandemic, and the lockdowns. But how has this really impacted the real estate market? To talk a bit more about it, talking about buying and selling here in southwestern Alberta, is Sean Ormston, CEO of Great Rate Realty. Sean, welcome to Bridge City News.
Thanks very much. Thanks for having me.
Now, Sean, we all know how devastated the oil and gas sector has been. It's really impacted real estate and businesses in Calgary, Red Deer, but not as much here in southwestern Alberta. We're more agriculture based. Have you noticed a bit of a difference with the economy, especially when it comes to buying and selling a property?
No, I have noticed even over the years, as the economy goes in southern Alberta, we're pretty consistent, and that's a good thing because people can rely on stability in the market. And that's something that hopefully they can plan for. We like to plan for things, and it's nice to have stability in the market. So we get that in Southern Alberta.
So what are we at right now in Lethbridge specifically? Are we seeing more of a buyer's or a seller's market right now?
Well, it's interesting. If you look at the last decade, we've probably been mostly in a buyer's market, but we are transitioning. Some of the power is now falling to the sellers. And we can see that. I was looking at some numbers today. We've got home sales that are up about 50% this year so far. Wow. From last year's numbers. We have sale price of an average of $320,000, and last year where it was $285,000. So we have about a 12% increase in sale price as well. So things are on the up and up.
Well, that's good news. Now, let's talk about some of the bigger markets in Canada. We've seen massive increases in property values, including what we see in Vancouver and Toronto. But what about Lethbridge? Do you see more of a slow, steady increase, maybe 2 to 3 points per year when it comes to building equity?
What we've seen in the past is up years and down years, very, very small, 1%, 2%. So not a lot changes. Sometimes we get 2%, 3%. We can string together a few years where it feels like we're getting a lift. And then we might have kind of a balancing that, things balance out. But this year, this is the time we're seeing, like I said, a 12% increase in the first sort of 3 months of the year, 2.5 months since we've got going this year.
Now, we've seen record low interest rates, Sean, under 2 points for a 5-year closed mortgage. Do you think this trend will continue? What are your thoughts?
Well, we were seeing interest rates. We've got some mortgage brokers in our office. We were seeing rates getting down as low as 1.5%, which was unbelievable only in the last month. However, we've seen money also flow into the bond market recently. When money flows into the bond market, that's what drives interest rates higher. And, things are around that 2% that you mentioned. But I think we'll see that for a sustained period of time, as the Bank of Canada seems to always announce that their interest rate is on hold, at least in recent months, recent years. I anticipate that interest rates will remain low for a sustained period of time.
Is a variable rate mortgage still a good option in our current market?
You know, I always tell people consult with your bank, consult with your mortgage broker when looking at rates. If you look historically, it always seemed that variable rates were better, but the margin to me, in my opinion, is so thin on variable rate mortgage now. It doesn't seem like it would make a lot of sense to choose a variable rate over a fixed rate.
Now, I locked in my mortgage a couple of years ago, a 5-year close for 2.79%. I thought, hey, that's a pretty good buy, pretty good deal, right? More goes to the principal, less to the interest. Is it maybe a good time right now to renegotiate a blended mortgage with rates so low to try and get closer to that 2% mark?
You know, every mortgage, from what I've learned from mortgage brokers, sort of informing me is a little bit different. And there are penalties in each mortgage. There are prices that you have to pay to get out of these these products. So when it comes to refinancing, I think you have to be very careful. You have to meet with your mortgage professional, meet with your bank, and really run the numbers to make sure that it's a good idea to either refinance or step into a blended product.
Now, you mentioned earlier the average price is what, around $320,000? So I guess people that have homes, $250,000 to $300,000, they're selling a lot faster?
Yeah, we're starting to see the days on market and the inventory drop, especially in the 200,000 to 400,000 range, where affordability is apparent. Even though the homes above 400,000, we're also seeing a jump in the number of units sold. I just had a look at those numbers, and those numbers are quite staggering. Last year to this point, there were 32 homes that sold. This year in Lethbridge, this year there are 77. So a jump of about 140%. So it sounds like a big number. Prices are about the same. I looked at an average about 477,000 for 485,000 for those homes that are in the upper price range. But as you mentioned, most homes are selling in the 200,000 to 400,000 range, and they're selling in fewer days on market this year than last year.
So what do you attribute the hot market to? Is it that maybe people are working from home more often now? They want bigger office space? Is they're working maybe a hybrid? What are people telling you right now?
I think it's a combination of things. The interest rates being low are fantastic. That's something that people can really get excited about because they can lock in a low rate and have lower payments as long as they qualify at the stress test that is put in place by the government. I think the pandemic has made a lot of people realize, or a lot of people have been forced to work from home. And so while they sit in their houses, they're thinking about, gee, I need more space, or, we really need to have a spot for the office, or something like that, where people might have a continued period of time where they are working from home. And thirdly, which I don't think a lot of people talk about, is we also have a large group of buyers, younger buyers, that are sort of coming of age into the market. Many of these buyers are, we might refer them as millennial buyers. They're under 35 years old right now, but a lot of them went to school. They had school debt to pay off. They had to wait a little later in life to buy homes. And now we have a large demographic that I believe is coming into the market in all centers, ready to buy their first home, somewhere between the age of 30 and 35 years old.
Let's talk about different areas of Lethbridge which seem to be more popular. I know people here that work at the station, they love the north side. Other people prefer the south side with the big trees, the bigger lots, but you get older homes. And then still there are others who love the west side because the newer homes and you're close to the ATB Center. And it seems to be more high density on the west side. What are you seeing right now?
Well, it's interesting. The west side has definitely grown the biggest in Lethbridge. There are as many people on the west side of Lethbridge now as there are on the north and the south combined. Wow. So a lot of the growth in the city over the past year has been on the west side. That's what really propelled this city into a 100,000 plus population as we've seen that growth. So people are choosing to live over there that want those newer homes, want those newer neighborhoods. There are newer neighborhoods, of course, on the north and south. Typically, the west side gives people a really good bang for their buck, and amenities have been developing on the west side. To your point about the ATB Center and the shopping that's come as the years have gone by.
It's funny. I live on the west side, and we're saying we need a Walmart. We need a Walmart superstore there. And so, we've been campaigning for that. I kind of envy people on the south side because you got all of the amenities right there. It's amazing, and the beautiful mature trees. I really love that. Sean, during the COVID-19 pandemic, are people a little hesitant to venture out to open houses or maybe showings right now? What are you seeing?
You know, there's been really good leadership and guidance from the Alberta Real Estate Association on how to handle showings, viewings during the COVID pandemic. Obviously, everybody's worried about, contact and services. So the Alberta Real Estate Association has mandated that realtors, when showing homes, only bring 2 people with them on each showing. And so if you have a party, even kids involved, we're swapping people out of, in and out of the house to make sure everybody gets to see the home that needs to see the home, whether that's the buyers, the parents, whoever. We're only taking in 2 people at a time. Everybody's masked up, everybody's sanitizing. We advise sellers to leave all the lights on, all the interior doors open, to limit the touching of surfaces. So I think everybody in our industry has done a really good job to pay attention to what we can do as licensed real estate agents, as well as follow the guidance of the Alberta Real Estate Association to make sure we're keeping people safe.
Now, you mentioned stress tests earlier, Sean. Talk a bit about stress tests and the tougher mortgage requirements. How do they actually work?
Well, I have a love-hate relationship with the stress test as a realtor, and I understand why the government put it in. They put in an interest rate that is more expensive to qualify at. So what they're trying to do is protect people from borrowing too much money. However, as a realtor, I get concerned that there could be some overstepping because the interest rates are so low today. People can lock in money, like we talked about, around 2%. And so I've ran some numbers with the mortgage brokers who are in my office next door, and we've looked at things, and for a 5% down buyer, they're losing about 30% buying power on the price of the home they can purchase because they're having to qualify for the stress test. And that's difficult in a place like Southern Alberta. I wish that the government would take an approach to stress testing for the much higher dollar value homes where it does matter. And I'm not saying where it has to be 500,000, maybe $1 million, whatever it is. We are seeing markets like Toronto and Vancouver where prices are north of $1 million for an average home. And that's just not the case in Southern Alberta, like we talked about. Average so far for the year is 320,000.
Have you seen what you get in Vancouver, though, for $1 million or $1.5 million? You don't get a lot. It's a little bungalow, maybe 700 square foot, built in the 60s. It's a fixer-upper. Think about what you can get here in Lethbridge in southwestern Alberta for $1 million. Now, Sean, if the stress test was removed altogether for the more stable markets like we have here in Lethbridge, how much of a difference do you think that would make for buyers?
Well, I think it would make a huge difference. Like I said, it's about, for your 5% down buyers, people coming into the market, first-time home buyers, it's about 30% more buying power. So, a $300,000 mortgage purchase could be a $400,000 purchase. It's that much of a difference. And there is a big difference in the quality and caliber of home from $300,000 to $400,000. Now, would we expect the market to also lift in prices? Absolutely, we would. So it's just, we're in the same boat though as everybody else. Everybody is required to follow the stress test rules in the country. And so we're no different, and buyers just have to navigate that at this point in time.
Are you noticing maybe a decline in younger people looking for homes because of the stress test?
I think some younger people are discouraged because they have to qualify at such a higher rate, and previous generations haven't had to do this stress test. I think, as long as you're borrowing fixed money for at least a 5-year term in Canada, I don't know that any of us can predict the future much more than 5 years anyway. So I'd like to see whatever that rate is to be the one that they can actually qualify for. So I think, to your point, there is some discouragement, but like I said, it's the world we live in, and we don't make the rules, we just have to live by them.
Now let's talk about advice you have for a young couple looking at buying their very first home. We had a couple of young couples here at the station bought their very first home. It was beautiful to see. But it's more than just the 5% down, isn't it? You've got the legal fees for your real estate lawyer. I mean, there's so much more, isn't it?
There is a little bit more. Legal fees can run somewhere between $1,000 and $2,000 when you're purchasing a home. You also have to think about the property tax situation. That's the one that's often forgotten about, is at what point in the year are the property taxes due. And so while the property taxes are calculated to the day, depending on the time of year you buy, you may have to come to the closing table with a check to shore those up. Or in some cases, if you're buying earlier on in the year, you may receive a check from the sellers for the time they've occupied the home up to that point, to which you'll have a nice big property tax bill due in June anyways. So you do need to plan for these things.
You know, Sean, some people actually co-purchase a home, joining up with friends, parents, or siblings to share the mortgage. Are you seeing more of an increase in this type of home buying right now to make it more affordable?
You know, in our market, I think things are pretty stable with that. Most home buyers are the only ones on the purchase contract. We do see co-signing from parents that are jumping in to help their kids buy a home. But I think in markets where prices are a lot more expensive than ours, you see a lot more of that. I looked at some statistics for markets like Toronto, Vancouver, and some of these expensive markets, and as much as 2/3 of all buyers are needing a co-signer to be able to purchase those very expensive homes. In Lethbridge, the nice thing we love about Lethbridge is that it's affordable, and $300,000, $320,000 is still a very affordable price tag in Canadian housing when average home prices across the country are flirting with $500,000.
How well are some of the bedroom communities doing around Lethbridge, like Coaldale, Raymond, and even Nobleford?
I think they all have, there's all various reasons to move to these communities, of course, and people like the smaller town life. Places like Coaldale, it's really big lots that are out there for even the new building areas.
There's a great
like
bakery out there too, we
Nobleford,
can't forget, right?
there is a great bakery out of Coaldale, absolutely. And Nobleford is a neat place because their property taxes are so low. And so if you are looking at your overall cost to live, that's a place where almost everybody's property taxes are under $1,000 a year. And so, and still you're on, city water, municipal water and sewer, which is important to people. So places like that people that want the small town life, I think those places will flourish.
Sean, we only have about a minute left here. Let's talk about floor plans. As you get older, like myself, I'm not a big fan of the 2 stories anymore. 15 steps up, 16 steps down, 31 steps. I'm out. That's it. I'm done. I bought a bi-level. People love bungalows. What are you seeing right now? Are the baby boomers and the Gen Xers preferring less steps?
I think as everyone gets older, they prefer less steps. That's where it seems to be the trend. Once in a while, we get folks that, some seniors that are really fit and they want the 2 stories. They want to do those steps every day because they think that that's something that's going to help them in their activity. But I think most of us prefer one level living as we get older. So we're seeing that desire. But the flip side to that is land is at a premium. And when land is at a premium for new housing and new development, the builders would prefer 2-story homes because that's what they can fit in some of the lots that are provided. To get bigger homes, they have to be 2-story. So we're seeing a good mix out there. Of course, lots of bungalow and bi-level buyers, but as time goes on, especially when we go back to the west side where all the new development is, majority of those homes are 2-story homes.
And we can't forget about the 4-level and 3-level splits too, right? Great talking real estate with you, Sean. Thanks so much. Sean Ormston, CEO of Great Rate Realty. Appreciate your time today.
Thanks very much for having me on.
When it comes to losing weight and eating healthier, we're bombarded with so many differing views and diets. Whom should we believe? Today's guest sees things from a more traditional viewpoint. Fallon Morel is the president of Weston A. Price Foundation and author of a book called Nourishing Traditions. Sally, welcome to Bridge City News.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Now, what is Weston A. Price Foundation all about, Sally?
Well, it's about first and foremost a man named Weston Price. He wrote the classic book on nutrition called Nutrition and Physical Degeneration back in the 40s, based on his studies of healthy, isolated people. And we set up the foundation to promote his work, to teach his conclusions, and to show the scientific validation of traditional foodways. And so many of them have been validated in the last 20 years by scientific research.
So how would you summarize your book, Nourishing Traditions? Now, this book was actually written, 25 years ago? Why do you think it's so needed right now?
Yes, people are really lost about nutrition and diet. The diet that's recommended, the low-fat, high-carb diet, lots of whole grains and everything, actually has made a lot of people very sick. And it's not a diet that people can stay on because it leads to cravings. And then they end up eating junk food, which puts on the pounds.
Now, in today's world, we constantly hear about how unhealthy it is to consume fats and foods like red meat. But you believe that traditional diets with whole foods are actually quite healthy. Why is that?
Yes, in traditional cultures, the fat of the meat and the fat of the animal products was the most prized part of the animal. They hunted only at certain times of the year when the animals were the fattest. And as Dr. Price pointed out, there are certain vitamins in the fats of the meat and in things like organ meats that we don't eat anymore that are just essential for good health. And we recommend getting these nutrients back in your diet and always eat the meat with the fat.
You know, Sally, when I was a kid, I remember my parents saying, eat that cow tongue, eat that liver, eat that calf brain. I'm like, oh, please, no. And I promised never again. When I became an adult, that's it, I'm done. But you're saying maybe we should get some of that back into our diet again?
Especially liver, which is the most nutrient-dense food on the planet. And there are ways of making liver taste good. That's one of the things we try to teach. You know, back before World War II, people ate liver once a week because the doctors told the moms, make liver so your children won't be anemic. Well, there's many other important things in liver. Everybody took cod liver oil. You know, this old-fashioned remedy, that's another thing that we recommend. So you can get these critical vitamins that we don't get in other places.
Now, can you give us some examples of what kinds of meals you might typically eat in any given week that would both be traditional and healthy?
Okay. Well, bacon for us bacon. Breakfast for us
No,
is
bacon, yeah. I like where you're going with that. That's part of breakfast, come on.
And some pastured eggs, especially with extra yolks and cream, and we cook them in butter. And or we have oatmeal that we prepared properly, soaked it overnight so it's easy to digest. And I put lots of butter on my oatmeal and a natural sweetener. Sometimes we make omelets, sometimes we make pancakes that have been properly prepared, soaked overnight. So one of our themes is the importance of preparing grains properly because grains are very hard to digest.
What about some of the instant oatmeal? I sometimes grab that in a pinch. Eat that for breakfast?
I think it's about grains. Grains, in all traditional cultures that use grains, they have a long preparation by soaking or souring, such as sourdough bread, because grains have a lot of toxins in them, and the proper preparation neutralizes those toxins.
Now, many of our foods are what we refer to as processed. What's the problem with processed food, Sally?
Well, first and foremost, it's the oils. It's the industrial seed oils, the corn, canola, soybean oil. And if I could give any one piece of advice is to get those oils out of your diet. They are truly toxic. And they didn't come into the food supply until the early 1900s. And since that time, we've seen an increase in heart disease and cancer. And we have the science to show why these oils contribute to these conditions.
Can you give us a list of types of fats? We talked about fats earlier, but the types of fats to avoid and those that are quite healthy for us?
So to avoid, it's the industrial seed oils. So those are corn, canola, soybean oil, all of these types of oils. To embrace, first and foremost, is butter. Butter is the fat in nature for the growth and nourishment of all animals. So there can't be anything wrong with it. And it is the healthiest fat on the planet for both children and adults. Lard is a wonderful, healthy cooking fat full of vitamin D. Bacon fat is kind of lard on steroids, and tallow, beef tallow for frying, duck and goose fat, and then the fruit oils, which are coconut, olive oil, and maybe some sesame oil.
Sally, are certain types of meat healthier than others? How much of a difference does it make to eat regular meat as compared to organic meat, let's say?
Well, I think what you want is pasture-fed meat, meat that has been raised with very little grain, that gets a lot of green grass, because that's what puts all the nutrients in the meat and the fat.
Now, what about eating fish? Fish is considered a pretty healthy food, but does it make a difference if it's caught in the wild or maybe from a fish farm?
It makes a big difference. And yes, fish is very important. Seafood of all types. Dr. Price found that the healthiest people did eat seafood. And yes, wild fish, eating their natural diet, Farm fish is fed a lot of corn and soy, and they are given antibiotics and various medications. So you definitely want wild fish.
Oh, wait a minute, you said seafood, okay, because I have people in my family that can't stand lobster, king crab. I love it, and they're like, it's terrible, it's disgusting. You know what that stuff eats at the bottom of the ocean? I'm like, but it's so tasty. So you're telling me it's actually healthy too?
Yes. Shellfish is extremely healthy, and you should embrace shellfish if you like it. We're not saying to eat anything that makes you gag, but then you need to find a substitute.
Dairy products are often not recommended by doctors and healthcare practitioners, but you actually believe that raw milk is quite healthy. Can you explain why?
Yes, raw milk is the way it's supposed to be, with all the good fats and with all the components that help you absorb all the nutrients in the milk and all the proteins undamaged. Once you pasteurize the milk, you damage the proteins. That's why so many people are allergic to dairy products today. And you make the nutrients very difficult to absorb. So we are great promoters of what we call real milk, and that's milk that's unprocessed from pastured cows and that's full fat.
Yeah, some of my family as well, they're allergic to dairy products or lactose intolerant. So we always talk about soy milk and soybeans in our diet. Now, is it okay in moderation, like Mom says, or do you recommend maybe staying away from soy, especially for infants when it comes to soy formula?
Yeah, so we recommend avoiding soy at all costs. It's full of estrogenic components. That's very bad for growing children. And it's also extremely hard to digest. It causes a number of deficiencies, such as zinc deficiency and B12 deficiencies, because it has blockers in it. So it's not a substitute for dairy. I would recommend you try the raw dairy and see if that agrees with you. We found that 88% of people diagnosed as lactose intolerant could drink raw dairy without any problems.
How about maybe almond milk or even rice milk as an alternative? Is there much nutritional value in those?
Yeah, not really. And they have a lot of emulsifiers and sweeteners added, quite a few additives. What I would suggest, this may surprise you if you want something on your oatmeal, or if milk bothers you, try cream. You might find that you do very well on cream.
Now, I believe you also have a bit of a concern about consuming margarine. Why is that?
Yes. Well, margarine is the fake fat. Margarine has a lot of trans fats in it, which we now know cause cancer and heart disease. And the thing is, you cannot substitute what's in butter. The vitamins, the special types of fats, all of the components in butter, there's no way that manufacturing can replace these.
I was reading online recently as well, people who are battling prostate cancer, a lot of men, that their doctors have told them to stay away from eating eggs, and raw eggs specifically. But then I talked to a lot of bodybuilders that's all they eat are lots of eggs. So who should we believe here? Are eating eggs healthy?
Yes.
Is it healthy?
Yeah. I think you need to get on foods very rich in vitamin A for any kind of cancer. So there's your liver, your egg yolks, your butter. I would always recommend these foods for a cancer patient.
Can you comment on sugar intake, Sally? What should we use to really sweeten our food? Maybe honey? And what types of sugar should we avoid?
Well, you want to avoid white sugar, high fructose corn syrup, which is worse than sugar. But we don't say that you have to have a diet that doesn't have any sweet things in it, because all traditional cultures had sweet things in their diet. So we've got the wonderful maple syrup and maple sugar from Canada and the United States, honey, natural honey, some of the more natural sweeteners. These are fine in moderation. And I think you'll find when you get on this diet and have plenty of good fats in your diet, you don't crave sweet things as much.
Now, when you say moderation, I'm thinking, I'm a Canadian. 100% Canadian maple syrup, you mean like a full glass or a good liter, right, of maple syrup? You can slam that back? That's okay, right? Because I'm Canadian.
Right. But for the rest of us, a couple tablespoons.
Maybe my dentist wouldn't appreciate that either, too. Or maybe he would, because I'll become a better patient with him. See me more often. Any final advice, Sally, on how to eat healthy and a well-balanced diet?
Eat real food. Eat food that your ancestors ate. Your ancestors didn't have vegetable oils. They didn't have sugar. They didn't have margarine. They didn't have spreads. They didn't have all the additives. So you do need to prepare your food. It can be simple, but you should, be very aware that you're eating real food.
How about the time of day that we eat as well? You know, I've spoken to other nutritionists that say you should have 6 small meals in a day. I said, 6 meals? They say, it will actually help you to lose weight by eating 6 meals instead of just like the big one at dinner time, right?
The best way to lose weight is to only eat 2 meals a day. So either lunch and dinner, or lunch and dinner, or breakfast and lunch. So you go 16 to 18 hours without food. That way your hormones give your body the signal it's time to burn fat now. And really, it's a very practical way for losing weight. And if the 2 meals that you do eat are very rich in good fats, you won't be hungry between meals.
So brunch or lupper, I guess that's what we used to call it in our family, right?
You can do that, yes.
Brunch or lupper? Now, should we not eat after a certain time, or maybe snack, like maybe not after 9 or 10 o'clock at night because the body's metabolism slows down?
I find that it's best not to eat after 2 o'clock in the afternoon, but I know people who've lost weight doing lunch and dinner, and eat a late dinner and then don't eat breakfast. So either way, you have that long period where your body starts to burn fat, and you also end up eating less because you're only eating 2 meals.
Sally Fallon Morel is president of the Weston A. Price Foundation and author of the book, Nourishing Traditions. Sally, thanks for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless, and thanks for watching.